Before going through the discussion, we're going to go through part one of the presentation today, which is the framework. We want to make a framework for understanding the cities. We maybe need to wash out what we knew before and just create a new understanding of the cities. First of all, why we need system thinking? What is the reason that we need system thinking? I can tell you at least two reasons, and you can find more and more reasons behind that. The first reason is that we need to move away from fragmented to holistic decision-making processes. The way that we look into the cities only relative to the boundaries of a city council is not working anymore, and we need to see the larger picture of the city. And we go through this in a few minutes. The second reason is that we need a new perception of councils. Traditionally, councils were equal to service providers who are collecting rubbish and, just looking after permits and, building construction and things like that. But now in the second part of the 21st century, the perception of councils has been changed towards being the biggest health provider of the city. They are bigger than any hospital, they are bigger than any rehabilitation center, and the responsibility is now to create well-being and health for residents and people. That's why we need system thinking in order to understand the city, the way that we change our perception of councils. Now, let's see what is the problem. Every council here is managing a capital project portfolio, including tens of millions in annual infrastructure spend. But the question is that, let's say I've got a capital project portfolio here, and I have a question whether I need to invest in infrastructure this year, or I might need to do some maintenance and operations, or probably is better to allocate most of this money to growth and investment. Then the two questions would happen: where should we invest? And the fact that, is this project really responding to actual risk? So investment generally follows urgency. A flood triggers drainage. An election commitment triggers erode. But the underlying vulnerabilities has no department, no line item. They leave in gaps between portfolios. That's why we need to realistically understand and define priorities, not what we gut feel, but what must be happen and should be evidence-based. Now, let's walk through a little game, what cities need and what cities face. On one side, the conditions that make a city work are including economy, public health, ecology, governance, infrastructure, and so on. On the other side, the risks are including urban heat island effect, flooding, bushfires, social vulnerability, economic decline, and so on. We need to know that these aren't two separate lists. They are opposite ends of the same systems. Let's have a look. If a bushfire happens, I should say there would be some issues with governance and planning, flora and fauna environment protection, and possibly infrastructure connectivity. Or let's say if there is urban heat island effect happening in the city, then I need to think about whether I've done my bits and pieces of flora and fauna environment protection well or not. So here, this slide shows how systems are not separate from the problems. They are different spectrums of the same system. Now let's talk about an honest picture of the cities. What cities need is that healthy communities, functioning ecology, connected infrastructure, effective governance, and so on and so forth. What cities actually face is that urban heat island effect, flooding, bushfire, housing unaffordability, social polarization, governance without coordination, and so on. Now, I have a question for you. Which column is your council's capital program actually responding to? Does your council have a mechanism, not a strategy, a mechanism that traces a risk back to the system that produced it. Like, for example, if you are, whether your council is only responding to urban heat climate stress rather than going back to the actual system that creates that is a big question. And unfortunately, in many cases, in most councils, respond to the right-hand column while underinvesting in the left one. We treat symptoms and we are genuinely surprised when the disease keeps coming back. Now, this is the climax of this discussion. This is the main point and the priority framework that we suggest in order to approve and provide such systemic understanding of the cities. The first priority in any city is human health and well-being. And that's why city councils are the major providers of health and well-being. This is relevant to the right to the city, food, education, basics, placemaking, social interaction, thermal comfort, and so on. After this priority, and only after this, the second priority would come in, which is including looking after flora and fauna, environmental protection, infrastructure and connectivity, and so on, which is talking about tree canopy, corridors, soil ecology, and so on. And bear in mind that number one and number two are complementary to each other. But only after doing one and two as a priority, we could expect sustainable governance and planning in place. As a result of implementing one, two, and third priority, then we can expect we would have economic sustainability too. And this is something that David would go through that in the part 4 of the discussion, how we system thinking could provide economic sustainability. Now, the question is, if human health is the priority in our system thinking from now on, then the question is how we can measure the health and well-being of human. The most powerful way to measure health and well-being across a city is by measuring the absence of it. The ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics Index of Relative Socioeconomic Disadvantage, we call it IRSD, is a postcode level health check, which is including low income, employment, education, housing quality, service accessibility, and provide a single score. If that score is below 989, as you can see here, then I could say that those suburbs would face high or very high vulnerability. So from now on, our measurement tool, our lens through the city could be disadvantaged through our IRSD, below average in Australia. The fact that when that score persists below average across census cycles, you are not looking at temporary hardship. You are looking at something deeper, and this will open your eyes to the real issues. You call it permanent vulnerability. And I have a question for you right here. Have you ever run IRSD mapping against your infrastructure investment history? If not, I'll suggest you to do that tomorrow. Now, let's go through the case study 1. The case study 1 is Adelaide, and I'm showing you, getting back again to that sort of theoretical framework which we developed as human health and well-being as the top priority of system thinking. I want to show you that how political planning context, in fact, the third priority in a city could affect the health and human well-being, which is the first priority. And this is the case of Adelaide. I want to show you how governance structure created permanent vulnerability in in Adelaide metropolitan areas since the last, during the last 30 years or so.